Pigeons 420. Mr. Grow It. And Rob from Cannabis Lifestyle TV. From the Stash Podcast.
What up, everybody? It's your boy Rob from Cannabis Lifestyle TV, Pigeons 420, and Mr. Grow It from the Stash Podcast. We are back, boys.
Hey,
what's going on?
It's been a couple weeks actually since we
I feel like it's been
did an episode.
forever.
We took a little break there for a minute. Let's call it Christmas break.
What do you mean?
We'll
We're still
throw
putting out
I saw
episodes
you
every
last
week.
We are. Yeah, we are. What are you talking about? Yeah. What are you talking about?
Shit.
No, it's good. I still had somebody come over to my. I was gaming there the other night, and someone was like, "Oh, you're gaming and live on the Stash right now?" I was like, "No."
Multitasking.
Yeah. They're like, "I see you playing Grand Theft Auto and on the Stash." I was like, "No."
I'm good at a
What do
lot.
you mean?
I'm good
They
at a
just
lot.
outed me.
Oh, because people think that the premiere is actually live.
That the premieres are live.
It's crazy
Yeah.
how, like, when it says premiering now underneath there, it's confusing to some people, and they're like, premiering a live now? Okay, I see what you did there. It's
Well,
like,
and the
no.
fact that people can chat with other people too, right? Like you're in a live chat, so people are thinking that this is live.
Yeah.
You know, I
Even
just
though
want
when
them to
I'm
know
like
that
talking to you in the chat, they're like, "Holy
Right,
fuck,
I want
Rob
them to
is
know we're
typing
not
and
live."
talking."
because it's like they're thinking like, are they ignoring the chat? You know? They're not even reading the chat.
It's like we're not here.
We're not here,
We're
but
in
we
the
are
chat
typically in the
with you.
chat for a premiere.
Yeah.
Thanks
So-
for watching these videos, guys. Appreciate it.
I
Thanks
was
for
just
hitting
gonna
those
say,
thumbs
so for
up.
people who are watching, have they hit the thumbs up yet, or are they just lingering? Because I know. Listen, we get these guys way too stoned. I think what it comes down to is we taught people to grow too good of herb. They get too faded, and then they forget to smash the like button.
Well, and they start listening to your two fucking gorgeous voices, and it's just like, wow. It's just
I do have a face for radio, so I appreciate
face for
that.
radio, but a
Appreciate
voice for Broadway.
that. Hey.
Huh?
So you know,
Well-
speaking, it's funny you say that because my mentality has changed on that. Where after I get my haircut, I feel a little bit more attractive. But
More
my
fresh.
my mentality has changed on a lot of different things over the years, especially when it comes to gardening. And I think that's today's episode is to focus on how our mentality has changed. What for us has kind of progressed or even digressed for me. Honestly, there's certain things that I was doing a little more of that now I'm doing a little less of, and it's basically changing on the mentality. So I know you guys have been growing for a while. I know you kind of changed things up just like myself. P, I know that you are a little bit more stuck in the mineral-based realm. We're going to get you in some organics, but my first thing I'm going to say right off the bat, is the organic versus synthetic argument. Now, I was really stuck on this where it wasn't necessarily that one is better than the other, but for the reason why the argument before was that, oh, well, you're going to get way better flavor from organic, or you're going to get this or that. I don't see a huge difference in the aspect of my end results. What I do see in the huge difference is the input. So how much I put into it, whether it be time, money, products, everything, and even output. I'm not throwing away my media. I'm not throwing away bottles. I'm not throwing away any of these things. I'm reusing it, and I'm getting the best version of that plant without me doing the additional work. So my mentality has changed dramatically from the beginning of like, fuck that, to now I'm like, well, you should consider trying it. You may want to completely change.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree on that one. I mean, I started out using synthetic nutrients. I used Fox Farm Trio for 6 years of my grow career, I guess you could call it. And I was so stuck in that way that, you know, when organics came around, I was like, why bother? You know, I'm using synthetics. Synthetics are plant available. They're easier to use. In my opinion, back then, they were easier to use. It's like, why bother? And then I kind of got in the hype train to where a lot of people were saying, well, it's bad in an economic sense, right? Because you're flushing, having to flush down salts to your drain and water waste and all that stuff, right? Yeah, environmentally friendly. Yep. I don't know what I said before.
You said economical. Sorry,
Yeah,
you said
okay,
economical. No, you're good. You're good.
That too.
Well,
Yeah.
you're right. But continue. Sorry, I distracted you.
So yeah, then I was all about, you know, I got into that mindset of, well, then nobody should be growing with synthetic nutrients, right? It's terrible for those people, bad people that grow in synthetics. It's just,
How dare you?
and now I've kind of changed my mindset again to where it's like, I feel like synthetics have a time and a place, right? If you're growing a small home grow, you're just starting out, you only have a few plants, synthetic nutrients, not the end of the world if you use synthetics over organics, right? Ideally you use organics because you can reuse that soil easily. There's a bunch of different benefits. You're not having to flush, things like that, not having to mix up those nutrients, which can be very time consuming. So there are a lot of benefits to going organics, but it's really not the end of the world if you're going synthetically. And I know people are going to hate me in the comment section for saying this stuff.
They hate us anyway.
But I do believe that there is
Bring
a
it
time
on.
and a place for synthetics. Now I know,
Yeah.
P, you're always using synthetics, right?
Yeah, and before I even continue, like, there's no reason anyone should bring hate to anything. Like, I just listen to
Yes.
both of you. I just listen to both of you. You're two wonderful organic growers, and your evidence is in your work, and your work is posted publicly almost everywhere. So it's like you can't deny the efficiency and the effectiveness, the environmental impact or lack of, if you will, the lack of negative environmental impact by organics is there. It's observable, tangible. But yeah, I have when it comes to synthetic. Again, these are things I've talked about a million times. We've kind of hit this nail on the head. But when it just comes to routine, I got her down, and it just fits to the routine. I'm in the garden every 2 days. In terms of work. When it either comes to watering and or feeding, it's just it is what it is. I haven't had I will just say that I haven't had that change yet or of opinion when it comes to, in general, how has my views of synthetics changed over the years. It has changed. Of course it has. I see what you guys have brought forward in terms of evidence and quality of product at the end of the day through organics. So my mind of organics has changed. I just haven't changed my process or techniques yet. But something for me that has changed dramatically since the beginning of growing was the conversation between LED and high intensity. And I was hard set, and mainly because I'm hard headed in my approach of using either metal halide or HPS. And the reality of the situation was, although product was comparable, the product between, and I still believe the product that you hold an LED bud and a high intensity display or diode bud
Discharge.
discharge. Thank you. You're not going to know the
Ballpark.
difference. I don't think you're going to know the difference. I think you're going to just be like, they're both really good. But when the reality is I didn't take into consideration the impact that HPS was having in my flower room in terms of the environmental impact and the heat that was being given off. When I switched from HPS to LED, I got rid of a 15,000 BTU air conditioner on the same day. People say that you would save so much money switching from HPS to LED. Not just the HPS to LED. Yeah, there was a huge savings there, but I no longer had to cool my garden. Ever. I don't have any kind of cooling in my garden. I now have a little space heater to keep the place warm.
Polar opposite. I know. Like, I got
and
to
it's
deal with too.
much smaller. So I think, and not to mention, when I started growing, LEDs were there, and of course you had those hardcore enthusiasts that LED was the way to go, and it would be the future. And although they were you could listen to their argument, I couldn't afford the product. We're talking thousands of dollars plus, for a good LED. Well, back then I don't even think it was
Decent LED.
Yeah, it wasn't even a good LED. You're getting decent LEDs. So yeah, my opinion has changed dramatically. Now I think although there's I'm sure big warehouses or something are still going to be using HPS for like maybe an economical sense. You're going to spend far less on HPS lights on 1,000+ square foot farm, but the reality is exactly short term, because you're paying for heat to cool it. But LED far more sufficient or efficient and effective than HPS. That was a big change for me.
Yeah, LED is a hot trash back in 2013, right? It was really bad back in 2013, and they were less efficient than HID, right? A lot of people didn't know that. They had that blurple spectrum, right, where it was heavy in blue and red, and you can't really see the plants at all, and light bleaching occurred a lot with those lights. And then the power
Diodes
output.
dying out.
Yep, diodes dying out. So quality reasons, the power output wasn't as much. So that's why you get a lot of people that were like, "Oh, HID is way better. I'm getting way bigger yields." Well, that's because those lights just weren't performing back then. But it's another thing that was on my list for things that have changed. My stance has changed on LED over the years. I mean, 2015 is when I got my first LED. I had the platinum LED P9 XML2, and that's the Cree
It's
one.
a hell of a light to start your game with, man.
For
Well, at least
LED.
back then,
To a
yeah,
balls
that was a
deep.
good unit. That's a beautiful
And it
unit.
was good. It was really good. Yeah, I got a really good yield the first time I ran that, and that kind of changed my ways. Now, I don't know what the efficiency of that light is, whether it was more or less than HID, but I definitely got a good result. And that's really kind of when the game had changed for LED is 2015, 16, 17. And then, I mean, look at where we are today.
Look at today.
I mean, clearly more efficient than HID, better light spread, right, across the footprint. There's lights that are bar style lights that can cover your footprint a lot more even than an HID hood can, right? So I've definitely changed my ways when it comes to rocking LEDs over the years, for sure.
Well, you got to look at your overall ROIs. The initial investment is going to be high, and that's usually most quality things. That's the case. But long term, you're going to be getting a better return on investment in comparison to paying for the HID. And now I still do rock the CMH light, ceramic metal halide. It's more of a spectrum thing for me, and that's where the new style LEDs, you have full spectrum, white lighting. Not only can you see any issues that you may have in the room, but you're getting better overall spectrum for that plant, a little closer to the sunlight than what you would otherwise. Like, you're getting more of the color rendering index that's going to be a lot closer to natural light in comparison to an HID. So for me, it's a no-brainer in quality, overall efficacy, and again, my return on investment. But there was, like, nowadays I think you're just splitting hairs on companies or products that are better. It does come down to brands where it's like customer service. Shout out to Austin and the homies over at CLtv and Dan, Green Sunshine Company. There's I could count on one hand the companies that I can recommend, and it's not because the brand, the quality of the light, by any means. It's just the people that I've dealt with and the customer service and the warranties and these little things, because the LED game is just stepped the fuck up. But you're still paying like $1,000 for
Right.
a really good light. That's still the downside.
But you that kind of ties into another view that has changed, in that you're splitting hairs with a lot of these different products. I'm synthetic nutrients. It's like, you want to talk about splitting hairs, man. It's like, it's coming
Which
down.
brand,
It's coming down to a brand. I want to see a brand's investment in the industry. I want to see their investment in the customer. I want to know that they've got a reliable, solid product, and then I want to see them supporting the online community as well, supporting creators, so that we can flush out the good products from the bad. I do think that's a tier to that as well. That's the difference. That will be the difference. And that's a view that I had to come to see as well. I had to weed out a lot of these sponsors that I've had over the years too, where it's just these fly-by-night companies, that are here and then gone. And then, it's just like, no.
Well, I don't know about you boys, but I've never had so many LED
brand.
manufacturers at my inbox, ever. And they all have very comparable quantum board LEDs or bar style LEDs. They all look the same. They're all the same, different brand. And I'm like, well, what's unique about you? What makes you better? And I'm not going to tell people to spend money with you unless you can prove it.
That's right.
Just is what it is. I couldn't endorse LED for the longest time because of that. I was pushing a ton of people to CMH. I went from 1,000 watt high pressure sodium to 600 watt high pressure sodium to 315 ceramic metal halide. And I got really, really comparable end results in yield, but my quality was better and my overall electricity bill was cheaper. So it was a no-brainer for me to switch up. And then once LED came into my life, where I saw it was around. Trey's, ran the grow store for years, been around the grow community for fucking well over a decade, to the point now where I'm like, why change? Just like you said, P, I'm in my routine, for feeding. I didn't want to change to organic other than for content. I didn't do it for anything besides more content. The community wanted to see it, so I did it. But I was more in the mentality of, if it ain't broke, why fix it? And it was the same way with CMHs. If it ain't broke, why fix it? But then I had a ballast go out on me. And really in the market, he's been there since way before it was popular. And he's telling me all the time, he's like, man, I don't throw this shit away. I've got stuff in the closet that I don't use, but it's not in a landfill. And I'm like, that's a big concern for me, is I don't trust the recycling in anywhere, any area of the world. I don't believe they're truly recycling stuff, because a lot of these companies will publicly say that it's not as profitable for them to get recycled parts compared to, fresh plastic that they can work with, or, glass, different things like that. So the environmental impact is a big reason why I switched over to LEDs. I'm like, man, less electricity usage. If I don't get a piece of shit light, it's not going to wind up in a landfill. I'm not going to have to go through these bulbs and these different things like that. It just overall, this is a better investment for me and for the world. So that's why I pivoted and switched. That's the biggest reason. And then once I was there, I'm like, holy shit, why wasn't I already here? This is amazing. I need to buy another 2, 3 of them. Like, this is the best. So it's, until you try it, you can't knock it. And I knocked it because of the reasons we just mentioned. Just was too expensive. The quality wasn't there. Companies weren't there. 2021, LED is definitely where it's at.
I kind of a horror story. Actually, a buddy of mine, my brother-in-law's mother, was running. She had a vegetable garden in her basement, and her metal halide bulb exploded, and then caught her basement on fire. Now the tent that she had it in actually contained the fire long enough that my brother-in-law, he was able to run into his they actually live very, very close to each other, was able to run into his mother's house, run down into the basement, and start putting this fucking fire out. And the house was actually saved by the tent. And his work, but the tent. But my view changed when I realized that a lot of us are using these bulbs. I was using the same HPS bulbs at times for years, and I know that their effectiveness goes down. I wasn't seeing it in my yield enough to be like, get this bulb out of here. You know what I mean? But to hear that there's a possibility of loss of life, I was a little bit concerned.
Yeah, man, it's just, in my opinion, not worth it in so many ways. I still get people arguing with me, like, you need DE, you just gotta get double-ended, you just know there's nothing compares. I'm like, there's so many pros and cons, man. Let's go down the list, and I bet you by the end of it, you may lean the other way. Well, you may potentially get more yield. You're sacrificing a lot of other things. So, I don't know. You can also use PGRs, but is that, beneficial? I don't really think you should.
You touched on maximizing yield. I think that's a good transition for this. It's another thing I've changed my stance on over the years. I remember when I first started growing, the first several years of me growing, it was all about maximizing yield, biomass. And I used to beat myself up so much if the plant that I was growing didn't have as big of a yield as the previous plant that I grew. Right, so I'd hold myself to a higher standard. I didn't know about genetics. I didn't know about the different cultivars and how it's in their genes as far as what their yield could potentially be. I didn't know any of that. So over the years, I've really learned about different cultivars and how they can yield differently. Right, you get a strain like Lowrider number 2. That thing's not going to yield anywhere close to, I always like to say Big Bud is one of those high yielding strains that a lot of people know of, right? It's just in their genetics. So as far as holding myself to high standards of always maximizing yield and then the next yield needs to be bigger than the previous yield, I'm just so over that. And also the fact that I have a supply, I'm fortunate enough to have a supply to last myself a while, so I don't have to focus on yield. That's not my primary goal. A lot of these people on YouTube, when I first started watching YouTube in particular, 2011, 2012-ish, everybody was always about maximizing yield. It seemed like in their videos, it was just everyone was talking about yield. And so I just kind of followed in that footsteps, and learning those things I just mentioned, it kind of transitioned over to let's learn more about growing the plant, keeping it healthy so it's going to express the way that pheno wants to express. So just letting the plant do its thing, and then whatever yield I get out of it, I get out of it. I've definitely changed my mindset on that one over the years.
Yeah, and we got a video that may already be out, podcast episode. We'll see, depending on when this comes out, but about increasing the yield. And if that is a focus, then do it after you dial the plant in. Don't have that be number one, because trust me, you'll be pretty pissed off if you got in a big abundance of boof. I've been there numerous times. I just pulled a plant that I hate. I still have probably 3 or 4 Z's of somewhere. I don't know. I hate it. But it produced great. Biggest buds I've pulled in a long time. Hate it. I can't emphasize it to you guys how much I fucking hate it. Mm-hmm. And it gives me anxiety when I smoke it. I hate a artificial grapey kind of, terp. It's just not what I like. So overall, yield may not be the focus if it's not the cultivar or the strain, if you want to be OG like myself, that you're after. And I really like gassy, fuely, funky, dank cultivars. And I notice everyone that I've ever grown that has that, it's not a very high producer. Like the yield is so. So all I can do at that point is how can I increase it with what I have here? So maybe some training, some plant training, maybe put more plants in of that same cultivar at once, because back in the day, my thought was how much can I get per plant? It was bigger per plant. I need to get this, or gram per watt. And now it's like how much per harvest? Like I just want to make sure I can fill some jars.
And that could mean 4, 5, 6, 7 plants. You know
that could
what I
be
mean?
2,
Like,
3, 4 plants, just depending on the
right?
size. There's so many variables. So it's like, in my case, headbanger, I got to put more of them in. So I don't want to push this plant to the point where it potentially Hermes, or it gets to the point where it doesn't have the terps that I'm after. I want it to express the best characteristics that it has. So from there, I'm just going to put a few more plants in then. I have the capability. I'm blessed to have patience here. I don't really have patience, but I have patience for medical cannabis that luckily for me, I'm able to grow more plants. Michigan's very generous with our numbers. So if I need to, I can put more plants in. I can expand my space if I have to. So it really just depends on what the focus is. Some people who just like to smoke. I know, like for my mom, she'd rather just have something to smoke at a certain point. So she's like, whatever, give me something that yields. I just want to have an abundance. I'm like, all right, a month into smoking that shit, you may change your mind. We'll see.
Yeah. And you know what? I think, Chris, you touched on it when that was a mentality thing. It wasn't about the best weed you could grow back then. It really wasn't. It was how much could you get off of a plant, and that was a general conception that had to be shaken off throughout as we progressed through. Because you'd realize, holy man, I just had an amazing plant, but I only got 2.5 ounces off it. You know what I mean? I'm like, wow. That was a mentality. I was watching the same videos and I was seeing that same thing, and that gram per watt. Like, that is just an obscured, arbitrary number. Like, if maybe in the HPS days when you could really look at how much wattage you were pulling off of.
I'm running the focus.
Right. Wow, you're not like. I hope I get more than 35 grams off of my harvests these days. You know what I mean? Because that's really how many watts I'm using. It's like the gram per, well, maybe a little more, but the reality is that the gram per watt idea is a little off.
We'd be killing it if we're talking LED wattage.
Oh,
everybody'd be like, dude, I'm fucking knocking it out of the park, bro.
Getting 20 grams of watt, man. Anyway, a little exaggeration, but another, like, to tie into the idea that is bigger is better and more is better, is that concept right there. I just recently, within the last 2 months, probably like just after Christmas of 2021, I came to the realization that my garden has gotten way too big. I have grown to become so large. I thought, plant count should be huge. I feel like I should have as many plants that I could physically grow as possible, so that I could harvest as many as possible, so that I could have mountains of herb. But the reality of it is that I'm far more comfortable growing 3 plants at once. Well, maybe in flower and then a couple in veg, 3 or 4 in veg at a time, it's so 8 plants, rather than doing 30 plants in 2 rooms that have a combined square footage of like 200 square feet. Like it was unrealistic to think that I would use 1/6 of my basement to grow medical cannabis for myself. It's like, it would be one thing if I was supplying patients and other people, but I'm doing this myself. I accidentally have way too much weed.
Good problems.
Right, the great problem to have. But the reality of it is like, it's way too much. I have way too much, and I'm trying to still yet maintain, because it's like I feel like I could take a 3-year break. You know what I mean? Like I need to slow down. So it's like, one thing is bigger isn't always better, and that's something that I've really had to take into consideration. And depending on when this comes out, I might be back on YouTube, and you'll know that things have drastically changed. I have made some big changes to accommodate this conception that I don't have to have 2 rooms that are 10 feet by 10 feet. You know what I mean? And so
Well, and potentially to have better plants with less numbers. So you can have a big amount of plants. I've been there before. I had 36 going in my veg room at once recently on a pheno hunt, and they got too tall, and I didn't train them as well as I should have, and I didn't clone certain ones I should have. It was running at a C level quality, and not like C level in the business world, like a C. And now it's
No,
at an A. It's right. It's where it
and
should
that's-
be. My
that's a
systems and
huge
processes
point.
are down. So
That's a huge point.
Sometimes you want less numbers to get more yield potentially.
Well,
You know, you're
can
going to
turn
have more
less,
raw.
less into more, really, and that's aha moment that I had was I need to turn these 3 or 4 plants into the most incredible weed I can, and I'm not doing that with 15 plants on each side of the door. You know what I mean? Because they're not getting that individual attention that they deserve. So yeah, big aha for me.
Different strokes for different folks is, I think that's your saying, Rob.
Hey,
I've been stealing that
Gary
pretty
Coleman.
recently, but
RIP.
yeah, I mean, we're not hating, right? I mean, we're what I consider smaller home growers, right? So we have low plant counts. We're not in a commercial facility, so somebody who is growing for yield, maybe they're on the black market or whatever, or they're at a commercial
gray
facility,
market.
they're going after yield. Like everybody has their own different ways of going
Absolutely.
about it. So this
Absolutely.
is certainly no hate. This is just kind of our discussion on what we like to do, what we've learned, and things that
And what
we've
our
changed on over
views
the
have
years.
changed.
Yeah,
that's
For
the
the new
key.
people. Like if you have been here, if you're a real Grow Me, you're a real follower, Mr. Grow It. If you've been in the flock, if you know us, you know we're not haters, man. The whole goal here, everybody who watches this, everybody who listens, and everybody who's in this community is to have better quality or more abundant herb. It's the only reason we do this. So
Knowledge
I
is
think
power,
that-
man.
Exactly. I was gonna say knowledge is power, and if we all can share that knowledge, if people in the comment section, they have some stuff maybe they've changed their mind on, some things that they once were stuck on that now totally different mentality, that'd be helpful for the fellow grower as well who may stumble on this.
And I don't know about you two, but maybe I can speak for the three of us. But personally, a lot of what I have changed, and you kind of mentioned this yourself, Rob, a lot of what I have done and changed is specifically because of what I've read in the comment section of my own damn videos. People are like, well, have you ever tried this? You're having this problem, Pigeons. Try this. Whoa, consider this. And it's just like, like the reason I have gotten as good as I am, or have, if I may say that, is because of my audience. It's because they've pushed me to succeed and to look into new avenues and to push and to do better, and failure is a variable, but it's because of my audience that's allowed me to overcome that and push for more, so yeah. What views have you had that have changed over the years? How did they change? Did we have an impact on changing that, or is it just something that you came in on through your own fruition? Is through trial and error. Does it cost less to run LED in your garden than HPS? I want to hear from you.
Or for
I do have one more.
I was
I do have
just
one
gonna say,
more.
or for
Yeah,
example,
I got
the next
a
thing that
couple.
Mr. Grows, I think we had another couple actually. It
We
ain't
have
done
one.
yet,
I
people.
at least have one more, so
Mhm.
I don't know about you guys,
Drop it
but
like it's hot.
this one is still one of the most controversial topics out there. Is flushing.
shit.
Okay, something that I've changed my stance on over the years. So when I first started growing, reading the forums and seeing what other people do, flushing was a must. Right, when you're growing with synthetic nutrients, you need to flush. You need to flush out those nutrients out of the plant, or else if you leave those nutrients in the plant, you're going to have poor tasting buds.
And you're
Your
poisoning
ash
people.
is going to be black
You're gonna die.
versus white or gray, or so on and so forth. Now a lot of things have changed over the years when it comes to flushing. One of the main things is studies are now coming out. I know of one study. I think there's another study out there. I don't have the link to it. Study I'm referring to, and I actually did a video on this, is by RX Green Technologies. Now, they are a nutrient company, so a lot of people are saying that this is biased. But in their study, they did a couple different flushing techniques. They did no flush, so they fed synthetic nutrients all the way up to the end. They did, I think it was a 5-day, a 7-day, 10-day, and 14-day, I believe. So they had a bunch of different plants, and they did different flushing times. Now, overall, what they found was no difference in yield, no difference in potency, no difference in terpene profile, no difference in mineral content in the plant, and subjectively, no taste characteristics was different as well. And I say subjectively because we're all different. We all have different opinions on how things should taste, if they're good
Some
or bad, so
people
on
taste
and so
salt in
forth.
weed. I don't know. You've got those crazy palate guys out there. So
right?
You never know. They may taste the difference.
But, to wrap things up, if there was no difference in yield, terpenes, mineral content, etc., then why even bother to flush, right? Why not just feed nutrients all the way up until the end? And that's some people's argument is, okay, feed all the way up until the end. Flushing is a myth. This study reveals that. But you can also look at it the devil's advocate, right? So if feeding nutrients for the last 14 days doesn't cause any differences in yield, potency, terpenes, whatever, then why feed nutrients for the last 14 days, right? So that's the other side of things, right? So you can go either way, right? Who's right, who's wrong? You could do it either way. And the video that I have, it's actually about to hit 100,000 views. There is so much crap in the comment section of people. It's funny to read,
All
actually.
the scientists.
Yeah, all the people are like, oh, this is wrong. This is biased. This is.
If I may, I am familiar with this study. And I believe I covered it on one of my live shows. Now, I posed the same question. The tests that were done on this bud was pre-consumption. What I would be, or I guess if you were to say taste and stuff would be post-consumption. But what I'm curious is the health benefits of consuming a product that is still laden with nutrients, but once combusted, are they still nutrients or are these now combusted chemicals that you're inhaling? That would be my only concern. I still flush. I believe that as someone who uses synthetic nutrients, I want to have a minimalized impact of my nutrients on my final product in the last few days. And again, I believe that within the last I'll touch on. I'll digress in a second.
Do you leach?
Because
that's
no,
where
I flush. I do flush.
Heavy water through there.
15 gallons of water in a 5-gallon pot, 3 times the amount kind of thing. If it's a 7-gallon pot, so on and so forth, or at least until the water is no longer saturated in brown. Now, my concern would be on a health aspect of it. Now, obviously, consuming flour through smoking or combustion, is harmful to your health. We can't argue that because you're smoking something and it's a carcinogen, or I don't know the technical term, but you're inhaling a foreign substance into your lungs that contains plant matter. It's not the plant that gets you high; it's the THC, it's the cannabinoids, or in particular the THC. So if you were to strip all of the crystals or the trichomes off the plant through a concentration process, my question is then, do you still need to flush that plant? If you're just going for the trichomes and you're either going to squish it or you're going to blast it, do you need to flush that plant? Because now you're not consuming the flower portion of it. So that would be where I would insert my argument.
That's where a lot of people will argue about that they'll use contaminated product for extracts. Is they're like, well, I'm just getting this off. And it's like, well, you're getting a lot more than that off of it too.
I have heard that argument too.
And I think, like, for me, so I'll speak for Chris as well. With the mineral-based stuff, we leach our stuff normally. So I just stop putting nutrients in, and I'll just balance my water, and I just give it water at that point. So by the end of it, if I see runoff, it's clear runoff at that point because it's just ran through there. From what back in the day, reading it, scientists allegedly, or growers who claim to be scientists, aka bro scientists,
I
claim
graduated.
that there's 14 days of food available left in the media if you're if you've been feeding consistently. Mm-hmm. Now, transitioning over to the organic side of things, you're not gonna flush. So what I just do is I don't amend my media anymore at that point, and I'm kind of letting it deplete itself, and then I'll re-amend it afterwards when I'm going to use it. But the plant is telling me that it's finishing, and the only benefit for me, the main thing that I like about flushing or leaching or depleting of nutrients is the fade. I love to see a nice fade on my plant. I like to see it get that, it's more probably personal, those fall colors, the look of ripening. And I do see that sometimes my flower even gets a little bit of a nice color from the accents of those little bit of sugar leaves that are still on there. Or even, again, the flower itself gets a little darker or a little more purpley, a little funkier look. And that's just preference, the aestheticness, But the burn, nothing has ever been different for me, really.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I mentioned in that flushing video that I made as well, is kind of the fade, the chlorophyll breakdown, right? That's what it is. It's the chlorophyll breakdown happening, and then the color of the leaves are changing from green to yellow or whatever. that could be beneficial as well. Now, this is kind of my theory, and there's some people that share this theory as a reason for, yeah, right, pretty much, right. But the theory that if you're flushing and you're seeing that fade, chlorophyll is breaking down, and there's less chlorophyll that needs to be breaking down there in the curing process.
Mm-hmm. And that
So,
seems like
that could
perfect
be
logic. Like that, I don't
Right.
see how that seems like science, to be honest. Like how could
we
that
got to
not be
measure
the
it though,
case?
you know. We got to be able to measure it. We got to have repeatable,
Next time you're at the
repeatable
lab,
results.
let me know. No, but I think that's where the controlled experiment of taking the same cultivar and doing one side by side, that'd be the most controlled you can do, is to say everything about this is the same other than I didn't flush this one, I didn't leach this one, and I did to this one. Here's the curing time. I'm going to send it in. I'm going to get it tested. Let's see if there's any difference in the overall end product.
But then
That
how
makes
do we
sense.
judge, or how do we assess the health impact of those? So then
That's
we would
where
have
that's
can
next
you
level
light that
right
shit
there,
on
Pete.
fire and then this is legitimate? Can you because there's tests on tobacco, right? They know what comes out of of smoked cigarette. So like, can you put that shit in a vacuum and then smoke it and then analyze what comes out of the vapor or the smoke or shit? I don't know. This is fucking bro science for me. But
That's a good
but that
call
would
out,
be, yeah, I really think that we should find the scientists and get them on the show and see if we can make that happen. I will donate some headbanger to make it happen. I've got synthetic and I've got organic. I've got flushed and unflushed. We'll make it happen. We'll see. I think, honestly, those are the things that we need more of. We need, and now that
Absolutely.
the industry is opening up and people aren't being prosecuted and going to jail over testing things to help people. I mean, literally, there's laboratories who've been raided and had their things taken in, and scientists who've gone to prison over studies that they weren't supposed to do. They do most of it now in Israel, and now
Israel,
the last
thank goodness.
administration pushed a lot of it over here, but it's still not to its fullest potential. And then they're using BAMR quality smoke, not stuff that us home growers are using, or that's
no,
in the
what
market.
they only had access to what 2 growers that were supplying the entire federal government.
And
2
growing mids.
growers, and it's just like they should be an open. We should be able to send you a plethora of shit, and then you analyze all of it. You know what I mean? Wouldn't
Yeah.
that be like, what is the country growing? Send it to us, and we'll figure it out. You know?
Well, I got another thing on my list here. You guys, actually, we have identical list, Mr. Grow It. So I've got one thing to add to it that came through here as I'm thinking, but legalization. So I was all gung-ho. Legalize it. You know? Don't fucking criticize it. None of that bullshit. But I don't know, man. I don't know. The more I look into it, the more I see into how the laws are and how they draft these bills, the less I trust the U.S. government setting the standard, so to speak, on legalization. I hear a lot about dispensaries being ran potentially by the government. I hear about restrictions for growing. I hear about caregiver programs diminishing. A lot of things where I'm like, whoa, can't we just like leave it the fuck alone? Just like tax it and leave it the fuck alone. But they want to get the most out of it at all points. I don't know if it's because they think, hey, we need to control it to help the people, or because, really the logical thought, we want the most fucking money and control everything. And I don't know, man. Like, I'm really for local legalization, like state by state, right? But then not every state does it right. Not every county is following what the state does. I mean, my local area just allowed medical dispensaries to pop up, and they're still not here. This is 12 or 13 years after it's been legal. And they just now allowed it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, is legalization the way? Is decriminalization the way?
No,
I don't know.
decriminalization is never the way, for the
That's what
record.
I'm
It doesn't
saying,
matter
is
what
like-
what the question is. But I'm on the exact same page as you, and when it comes to legalization, because in my country is no example to follow. Because when we did the same thing, first nation, G8 nation or whatever, to legalize cannabis on a federal level. And from go, we knew that, like, you knew this was going down the wrong avenue when you had the former police chief of the biggest city in our country, or Toronto, I don't know if it's the biggest, I think it's biggest, heading the task force that was going to come up with legalizing cannabis. And the reality is that they immediately took a position of, we got to keep it out of the hands of children and public health, rather than focusing on the consumer. What about the person that's going to use it, rather than everyone else, the people that won't be using it? You know what I mean? Like, it's not that these aren't important things to think about. Children are, of course, going to be impacted by this. But the reality of the situation is the consumer was never the focus of legalization.
Those should be two separate departments in a single branch of the government.
Yeah,
You know?
my idea of legalization has changed because now we're not trying to advocate for legalization. We're trying to advocate for legalization. You know, we didn't get it in the first place. We're looking for a 2.0. So yeah, I'm in the same boat.
Yeah, I am definitely frustrated by the fact that the grow laws vary so much. I mean, in my opinion, everybody should be able to grow. I do believe there should be a plant count, right? We want to try to avoid the whole black market thing, although even if there's a plant count, there's still going to be a black market and people are still going to go against the laws there. But I definitely feel like in every state, you should be able to grow the plant. Now, my state in particular, if you don't have a medical license and you're not 25 miles away from a dispensary, then you can't grow the plant. Which, you know, the only reason why that could possibly be is because they want the tax money. They want you to buy from the dispensary so they get the tax money out of it.
Of course.
That's the only reason why I can think of that they want to do it. So it's kind of like greedy in a sense for that particular state to not allow growing. Now, luckily, I'm a medical patient. I am allowed to grow in my state. I'm registered with the state, so on and so forth. But not everybody has that luxury. I believe that every state should be able to grow. And unfortunately, we're just not there.
Yeah, I think that's where we've got different places are going to have different rules, of course, but the overall sweep of legalization has me a little concerned. I'm going to be honest. I'm a little worried. It doesn't matter what the administration is. I don't give a fuck what your opinion, left, right, that. It's the government. It's the same people. They're the same people, okay? One just wears blue, one's a Crip, and one is a Blood. Who rocks red? That's the only, same fucking shit's going to happen. They're going to be gone in 4 to 8 years. So I'm more concerned about where that's going. That's where I'm in between. I'm in the middle. Before I was gung fucking ho. Now I don't know. You know? I just don't want people having to go to jail for this. That's the key thing. Don't take people to jail.
People
Don't take away
still
people's
are
kids.
going
Don't
to
take
jail.
away their assets. Leave people alone.
Agreed.
Leave weed alone, damn it.
And there does need to be regulation. Like there
Yeah, I mean,
does
I'm
need
okay
to
with
be
regulation
regulation.
when
Like
it
you said,
comes-
Chris, I agree with plant counts too, because in houses for the impact on your structure, for example, a lot of these gardens that are coming up because there's no regulation are shanties. They're filled with lights and plants. They have no air control. They have got no moisture control. They've got nothing, and of course they're rotting out the insides of their houses because the moisture is getting in there. They're rotting. They're getting mold and so on and so forth. And it's just like, no, I think that there should be structure to this, but the problem is that would be patient focused, or at least consumer focused, because we don't want you to ruin your home. We want you to
that
grow.
wouldn't make sense for the government.
Right? No, we want you. But
Not
so
for the people.
that's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah,
But-
man.
And I always laugh at the the states that have specific laws about how many plants you can have in flower versus veg. It's like, why you got to micromanage it at that level? You can only have
Right.
3 plants in flower.
Who's
but you can
gonna-
have 4 plants in veg.
Who's
It's
the
like old
marijuana
asshole
police?
named Richard
Like,
sitting
who's
there
gonna come?
somewhere. He's
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me. Tick, 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 tick. Yeah, marijuana police. I'm just here to check, make sure you've got 4 and 4, sir. You got 4 in the veg, 4 in the flower. All right.
Here they call it
you got
a
clones
WeMat.
too, sir. That's going to be a $2,100 fine. Okay, promise to appear. Like, who the fuck? It's going to cost
Micromanaging.
so much money to enforce that stuff. But anyways,
See,
we're
now
kind of
here's what
getting.
they do.
This is a whole other episode. We
Yeah,
could
it's
go on
a whole
about this
other
all
episode.
day.
It
We
is.
could go on
I'm
about
just
this
gonna
all day.
one quick last thing is here's what they
do
do is all of a sudden your rights as a medical patient are stripped and you're over your numbers and all of a sudden boom, you're a manufacturer depending on where you're at, and there's some serious, or you get your card taken away and you get major, like, been there, done that.
Right.
I hate it.
We're talking
they've been-
years
yeah.
difference in jail.
That's a prohibition stories. We got that coming up. This is a slight pre-prohibition, slight post-prohibition, but we'll talk about that. You guys
What a
got
great
anything
episode
else that
today, guys.
Your mind's changed on anything else? No?
You guys
Still
did it.
stuck
You guys-
in the
we hit
mud?
it. Black
Oh,
out. Yeah.
blackout?
Think we
Still
covered a
stuck in the
decent amount of
mud and
stuff.
everything? We're
That was
good?
really good. That was really good. And I'm curious to hear from you guys. As we mentioned earlier in the show, what views do you have now that you didn't have before, or vice versa? What kind of views did you have before that you don't have anymore, and over the years?
Absolutely. Great show, boys. I think with that being said, appreciate everybody who's watching this on the premiere, listening to this anywhere you can listen to things you listen to. Obviously, want to watch all episodes at watchcltv.com. For From the Stash Podcast, it's your boy Rob from Cannabis Lifestyle TV, Mr. Grow It, also known as Chris to us here. The Birdman P. We'll
Thanks
see
for
you
having me.
next week.
Peace.
Peace.